What's a local urban legend in your area? A man once worked the night shift at a fast food restaurant. One night, in a terrible accident, he cut off his own hand. Desperate and bleeding, he rushed out to get to the hospital, but on the way, he was struck by a bus. People say he never left the restaurant. Every Tuesday night, his spirit returns, the stump of his arm clutching a spatula. When he's near, the lights begin to flicker, and a strange green slime slowly starts oozing down the walls. And if you're still there when the kitchen goes quiet, that's when he comes for you. During World War II, people say a Jewish man who was a pianist hanged himself in the gym of my school. Since then, many claim that the sound of a piano can sometimes be heard echoing through the gym. I've even heard it myself a few times. The strange thing is, our school doesn't have a piano. I live in Yonkers, just outside New York City. The infamous son of Sam once lived here, and there's a local story that he was involved with a devil-worshipping cult that supposedly met in a nearby park. Some people claim that he ended up taking the blame for murders that were actually connected to members of that cult. According to the rumor, the group even included politicians and police officers, which is why a cover-up was needed. Whether it's true or not, it certainly makes for an interesting story. The Italian's Villa. In my city, Gothenburg, Sweden, there's a grand, palace-like villa with a strange story behind it. The man who built it was an Italian immigrant, and people say he had once been involved with the Camorra before coming to Sweden. According to the story, he robbed a local gang back in Italy to get the money needed to start over and build his dream home. During the robbery, things went wrong, and he ended up shooting a witness in the head. The witness, it said, was the imam of a nearby mosque. Before he died, he supposedly told the Italian that his life would end, inshallah, right after his goal was finally fulfilled. The Italian was very religious, but he didn't believe that a Muslim could have any connection to higher powers, so he dismissed the words as meaningless. He fled to Sweden and began building an extravagant Italian-style villa in one of the most luxurious parts of Gothenburg. It took him 14 years to finish the house. On the very day the construction was completed, his doctor informed him that he had cancer. He lived in the villa for only 4 months before he died. Years later, when the house was put up for sale, people still referred to it simply as the Italian's Villa. This isn't really an urban legend, but here it goes. My hometown has a fairly large industry built around mining white sand. People say it's some of the purest in the world. When the companies finish extracting the sand from an area, they simply abandon the site, which leaves behind a lot of large lakes. When we were kids, adults constantly warned us about quicksand around those lakes. They'd tell stories about people getting stuck, disappearing, or even dying in it. Now that I'm older, I know there really isn't quicksand in most of those lakes, and no one actually died that way. The stories were just something adults told to keep kids from swimming there. And honestly, it worked, because those lakes are still dangerous. They're huge, very deep, extremely cold, and there's usually no supervision around them. There's an old 2-story wooden house down the street from me that's painted a horrible shade of Pepto-Bismol pink with green trim. According to local rumor, the woman who has owned the house for years once mildly offended a local bruja. In response, the bruja supposedly cursed her, She had to paint the house the witch's favorite shade of pink and keep it that way forever, or the male children in the family would all die young. Of course, the more realistic explanation is that people just needed some kind of story to make sense of why anyone would paint a house that color. Near my hometown, there's an old historic farm surrounded by a strange story. People say the owner was once a well-respected man who also served as the local minister. One tale claims that he grew frustrated with his congregation and once said he'd be better off preaching to rocks. Supposedly, he even placed stones in the church pews and delivered a sermon to them. The darker part of the story is a rumor that he impregnated his own daughter. After the child was born, it said he became so enraged that he killed both the baby and his daughter in the basement of the farmhouse. Whether any of it is true is impossible to know, but a friend of mine insists that when she was younger, she spoke with the ghost of the girl there. Munger Road. I live in a town with haunted railroad tracks. Spooky, I know. The legend goes that if you stop on the tracks late at night and sprinkle baby powder on your rear bumper, something will push your car off the tracks. When you check the powder afterward, handprints are supposedly left behind. The story is said to originate from a tragic accident. A bus full of children was once hit by a train, and the spirits now try to protect others from the same fate. The legend became so well known that a thriller movie about the tracks, also called Munger Road, was made. Not from my current town, but back home there's a local legend about the woman in white. She was said to be a noblewoman in the 16th century who was locked away and left to starve in the basement of the building that now serves as the town hall. Over the years, people claim to encounter her ghost in the bathrooms. Honestly, not the most dignified way to haunt a legend. We have a cry-baby bridge in our area, though a quick Google search shows that many towns seem to have one. The legend goes that if you park under the bridge at midnight and honk your horn, you'll hear a baby crying, and sometimes a white figure is said to run past. I tried it myself, and nothing happened. I'm sure there are even more eerie ones I'm forgetting. Hilton Head Island. On one corner of Hilton Head Island, there's an abandoned lighthouse with a dark history. Long ago, a slave is said to have hanged herself there, and after that, strange occurrences began, driving people away. Visitors claim that if you go there at night, you can see the shadow of a figure swinging against the lighthouse, and some say you can even hear her laughter echoing through the air. When I was growing up in my village in the 1990s, there was a strange man who was always riding his bike around town. I remember he was in his 30s, wore slightly dirty jeans, and a leather waistcoat over a grimy t-shirt. He looked a little rough, but no one ever saw him walking, talking to anyone, or causing trouble. He was just always cycling. Both kids and adults called him Herbie Cat Killer. The rumor was that he stole and tortured pet cats, and he supposedly wore a necklace strung with their teeth. Most of us assumed it was just to make him look intimidating, probably more of a Crocodile Dundee vibe than anything else. Years later, something terrible happened in the village. A 16-year-old girl from my school was murdered. During the early investigation, Herbie disappeared, which naturally made everyone suspicious. But the real perpetrator was caught quickly, and Herbie eventually returned to his usual cycling routine. It was only afterward, through a mix of indiscreet police work and village gossip, that the truth came out. Herbie hadn't been harming cats at all. He was riding around to watch when families went on holiday, then tipping off local gypsy camps who would break into garages and steal tools, motorcycles, and other valuables, splitting the profits with him. Probably the Triclops. Supposedly a mutant man created in a lab during World War II. He's said to stand well over 2 meters tall, with silver-colored skin, incredible strength, and nocturnal habits. He lives deep in the catacombs and survives by eating chickens and other small animals. Occasionally, the remains of his meals can be found near the entrances to his underground lair, and if it's quiet enough, people claim you can even hear him moving far below. Built in 1886, the Ohio State Reformatory was originally designed to rehabilitate first-time offenders in a humane way and was praised as a step forward in prison reform. But conditions quickly worsened. Over its 94 years of operation, the prison became notorious for abuse, torture, and even murder. Civil rights activists condemned it for its brutalizing and inhumane conditions, and it was eventually closed in 1990. Today, within the crumbling walls of this abandoned facility, locals say the restless spirits of former prisoners and staff still linger, trapped in the shadows of the past. Kind of an urban legend from my hometown. Lansingburg, New York, the old high school. The story goes that in the early 1900s, a teacher went mad and attacked as many students as he could with an axe in room 243. People say that at night, the room is haunted by his ghost, ranting, raving, and swinging a bloodied axe, while the spirits of the students can be heard running and screaming in terror. Satanists and human sacrifices on the mountain. The story goes that in the 1970s, a professor started a Satanist cult. They would drive up a mountain road and deliberately block it with their car. When unsuspecting drivers had to stop, the cultists would pull another car behind them, trapping them, and then, according to the legend, sacrifice them to Satan. There's a spot on the mountain called the King's Chair, which is said to be where the killings took place. It's easy to hike to and apparently resembles an altar. People also report seeing satanic symbols carved into the rocks, which somehow reappear no matter how many times they're sandblasted away. And, of course, there's also the legend of the Goat Man at Pope Lick Bridge. There's a folk legend in southern Indiana about the Blue Hole. The area is full of sinkholes, thanks to limestone that was worn away during the last ice age. That part is true. They're everywhere. The legend says the Blue Hole is a sinkhole filled with crystal clear, bright blue water, like what you'd see when a quarry floods. Supposedly, no one has ever reached the bottom because it opens into an elaborate underwater cave system. Even professional divers have come up empty-handed. Some teens are said to have drowned there, their bodies never recovered, as if the Blue Hole simply swallowed them. Compared to other Indiana legends, this one is relatively mild, but geographically, it's the closest spooky spot to where I live. I live in Worthington, Ohio, where there's a local legend about the White Bride. The story goes that in the late 1800s, a wedding was taking place in the town square. Through a terrible accident, a horse and buggy ran wildly across the village green and crashed into the wedding party, instantly killing the bride. According to the legend, if you visit the village green on the anniversary of the tragedy, you can hear the sound of galloping hooves and the bride's scream as she was struck. It's a big tradition for local kids to gather on the green that night and see if they can hear the ghostly sounds for themselves. The Barghest of the Moors. Legends tell of a Barghest that roams the moors. If you hear its eerie call, someone close to you is said to suffer misfortune or even die. If you see the creature with your own eyes, the curse is even stronger. Misfortune or death will come to you. On the edge of my town, there's a strange soldier doll riddled with bullet holes, covered in names and messages. The legend says that anyone who writes their own name on the doll will be killed by it the very next night. I live in Orange County, so most local rumors are either rare or all about Disneyland. Still, off the 55 freeway in Santa Ana, there's an Embassy Suites that some people have nicknamed the Death Hotel. The legend says that while the hotel was under construction, an entire concrete floor collapsed, crushing dozens of workers. Playground whispers among kids added all the extra details: greedy owners cutting corners, ghost stories, slabs pressed so flat there was no space between them, and so on. I first heard the story in first grade when my best friend's mom pointed the hotel out while driving US past on the freeway. It always freaked me out. In reality, the story is only partly true. A construction accident did occur, but only one worker died, not dozens, and it was just a tragic accident, not the massive floor collapse horror the legend makes it out to be. Denver resident here. Just search for Denver International Airport Conspiracy Theories and Blucifer, and you'll see why our airport has a reputation. According to the rumors, it's supposedly a New World Order or Illuminati headquarters, and the giant horse statue out front is said to be murderous. In reality, it's earned its nickname Blucifer because it actually fell on its creator, killing him. I have two local legends in my area. The Glowing House. There's a house on State Line Road, right where Arkansas and Oklahoma meet. It sits on about 10 acres on a hill, completely fenced off and posted. At night, the house seems to glow with a strange blue light, even though it has no interior or exterior lights and has been abandoned for as long as I can remember. Gravity Hill. Nearby, there's a hill, I can't recall the exact town, tied to a tragic story. A bus full of kids supposedly crashed there, and all of them died. The legend says that if you go to the top of the hill and put your car in neutral, it won't roll backward. People claim the spirits of the children are pushing the car up the hill to keep you safe. Some even say that if you sprinkle baby powder on your rear bumper, small handprints appear afterward. I live about 15 miles outside of Stull, Kansas, which has a rather infamous cemetery with an old church. Behind the church, legend says, there's a staircase that serves as one of the 7 gateways to hell. The church itself is just stone walls now, no roof, but supposedly no rain or snow ever falls inside. The staircase is said to descend endlessly, and anyone who tries to climb back up supposedly can't, even if they turn around moments after starting down. There used to be a large tree nearby, rumored to have been used to hang witches, though it was recently destroyed. Some say that years ago, even the Pope refused to fly over Stull. The site has become a popular dare for drunk high school kids visiting in the middle of the night. A few years back, the church walls were knocked down, but you can still see where it stood, and the staircase is said to remain. It's supposed to be hard to find. I've never searched for it myself, but many insist it really exists. I'm usually not spooked by creepy stories, but every time I've visited Stull, I was more than ready to leave. It's just an unsettling place. There are several houses here that date back to when the town was first incorporated, well over 100 years old, and all were built in the same style. Most are occupied by families and have been remodeled over the years. There's one house, though, that stands out. The owners actually live in a separate house on the property because this one hasn't been sold in over 20 years. Rumor has it the house is haunted, and anyone who has tried to live there supposedly never lasted more than a week before moving out. I pass by it almost every day and wish I had the money to buy and renovate it. It's hard to see a place with so much history sitting unused. This one's a mix of urban legend and true events. In my hometown, which is also a college town, there's a network of tunnels. A group of students once went down there to play a live-action version of Dungeons and Dragons, and they vanished. No one ever found them or their bodies. After an extensive search turned up nothing, the tunnels were permanently sealed. There's a large park not far from my old house. I still live in the area, just a different place, with a creepy story attached to it. In the late 1990s, a woman walking through the back of the park on her way home supposedly fell through a hole and landed on what appeared, once the dust settled, to be an old carriage filled with Victorian clothing and bones. The legend says that back in the 1900s, when train carts were pushed through tunnels by air, one of the tunnels collapsed. The train inside was never recovered, and when the system was later redesigned, it was simply left behind. Ever since I heard this story, I haven't walked through Crystal P. Park. Some of the old entrance tunnels are still there, and it's incredibly eerie. My high school was actually built on top of an ancient Native American burial site, and there was a murder there back in the 1950s. About 15 years ago, the school was rebuilt, essentially on top of the old building, which was buried and sealed off. Legend has it that the ghost of the girl who was murdered, along with the girl who killed her, now roam the halls of the abandoned school. Their spirits are said to be empowered by the energy of the ancient burial site, waiting for the chance to strike. Over the years, they were blamed for every misfortune or strange event that happened at the school. Where I'm from, there used to be a hotel that burned down several years ago. The rumor was that a little girl got trapped inside and now haunts the 4th floor. People claim to see her standing on the balcony late at night while driving by. When I was a kid, attending a wedding there, a group of us snuck up to the floor under construction, thinking this was our chance to finally see her. We spent a good hour scaring ourselves and convincing each other we saw ghosts, and saw absolutely nothing. I also lived in England for a short time, and there was a strange rumor there too. A babysitter claimed that every time she put the baby to sleep, it would cry and point at a scary stuffed clown in the corner. After it happened a few times, she called the parents to ask if she could move the clown, but they told her they didn't own any clown toys. The mother had always been afraid of them. When the babysitter returned to the room, the window was broken open with a ladder beneath it. The rumor went that some people were stealing babies, and the clown was supposedly used to hide the thief while they carried out the abductions. The high school I attended in Prague was supposedly used as a Gestapo interrogation center during the Nazi occupation of the Czech Republic. Rumors among students said that many of the classrooms, and even the schoolyard where we played sports, had once been sites of violent interrogations or executions. After my senior year, I learned that the building had indeed served as a Gestapo station during the war. Whether executions took place there is unclear. Records were either never kept or destroyed, but given the nature of its former occupants, it's probably closer to truth than mere rumor. Another legend claimed that the Nazis had begun renovating the building and adding new wings so that, viewed from above, it would form a swastika. Supposedly, they never finished before the end of the war, though this one seems far-fetched. It takes a lot of imagination to see a swastika from aerial view. Either way, the school was definitely eerie during the 6 years I spent there. There's an old 10th century castle in the area, not a nobleman's fortified home, but more of a military outpost. Legend says it's cursed, turning anyone who lives there into an evil bandit. The story likely comes from history. The noble family who built it eventually turned to a life of pillaging around 1050. The Dukes of Burgundy, who didn't tolerate noble families messing with their territories, crushed them. After that, the castle was used to protect the Saône Valley below, alongside the main duke's castle about 10 kilometers away. By the 18th and 19th centuries, the mostly ruined castle became home to hermits, mostly religious recluses. The last ones were eventually driven out by locals after mysterious thefts occurred at nearby farms. There's an old, abandoned house in my neighborhood, the kind every area seems to have. A body of a homeless person was once found there, and a young, depressed girl reportedly went there to take her own life. I'm not sure what the local legends say about it, but I do know one thing. I'm staying far away from that entire street. There's a cemetery in the area with a grave that has a very unusual feature. The coffin is placed under a large stone and suspended from chains above the ground, so it appears to float just below ground level. Through cracks where the earth has settled, you can supposedly see the coffin. At one point, bells were hung from the chains, though they're long gone now. The original purpose of this setup was to alert people if someone had been buried alive. Their movements would ring the bells, allowing them to be rescued. The legend goes that if you visit the grave around the anniversary of the person's death, you can still hear the bells ringing. Not exactly a creepy tale, but there's a local legend in Gainesville, Florida, about Tom Petty, who grew up there. The story goes that he wrote American Girl about a University of Florida student who supposedly committed suicide by jumping off Beatty Towers. Beatty Towers are a pair of apartment-style dorms on the edge of UF's campus, right next to Southwest 13th Street, one of the busiest roads in the city, also known as US. Route 441. She can hear the cars roll by out of 441, like waves crashing on the beach. The legend links the song's lyrics about a girl freaking out to this local landmark. Of course, Petty has denied the song is about this. The dorms don't even have balconies like the story suggests, and it's unclear if any student actually committed suicide there at the time. Still, Gainesville residents and UF students love keeping the legend alive. In the town I grew up in, there was a guy nicknamed Booger Red. He always wore the same grimy camo pants and a gray hoodie, and he smelled so bad that anyone nearby had to breathe through their mouth to avoid gagging. The rumor going around was that he kept a deer chained in a shed behind his trailer. The story goes that one time he tried to sedate the deer, but didn't give it enough. The deer supposedly fought back, injured him, and broke free, running off into the nearby woods. After that, people started calling him Dickless Booger and jokingly referred to the deer as Red's End. When I was in grad school, There were all kinds of rumors about bodies buried under the dorms, supposedly close to 500 of them. The school always denied it, but one of my friends claimed she had seen all the files on their locations while doing an internship through the MLS program. A few years later, a water main broke under one of the dorms, and suddenly 300 graves were discovered. Apparently, the state had built the dorms right on top of a cholera mass grave, something they must have known about. The White Lady is said to be Dorothy Southworth, who died of a broken heart. She doesn't do much beyond wandering the grounds. A road now runs through what used to be her garden, and people have reported seeing her in their rearview mirrors as they drive by. She is said to haunt Samlesbury Hall in the UK, which is considered one of the most haunted places in the country. Well, it's not really an urban legend. Most people don't believe me, but I'm about 90% sure it's real. They call it the ghost bus. It's an unmarked bus that seems to appear and disappear at random. I've never seen the whole thing at once, just glimpses around corners, but by the time I turn the same corner a minute later, it's gone. I ride the same buses all the time, yet I've only ever seen it a handful of times, always in a different spot. I even waited at the transit center for over an hour once, and it never stopped there. You can see silhouettes of people inside, but nobody ever gets on or off. Derbyshire, Chesterfield, to be exact. Spiny Norman. I have no idea where the legend started, but he's said to lurk in the woods, and he's out to get you. He's clearly just a hedgehog on some serious psychedelic trip, but still, after a few shandies and a stumble home, just hearing someone mention him is enough to make you pick up the pace. There's a mental institution in our area surrounded by several urban legends. One says that if you bring someone in to be committed, you get a toaster as a reward. Another story claims there's a patient who once took too much acid and now believes he's an orange, warning anyone who gets too close not to peel him. The creature of Harrison Bay. I live about 15 minutes from Harrison Bay, part of a larger lake in eastern Tennessee. Out in the deeper part of the bay, there's a nuclear power plant. The legend goes that a worker there was exposed to radiation and accidentally fell into the lake. His body was never found. The radiation supposedly transformed him into a fishman beast. He only preys on kids, and just before pulling them under, he tickles their feet. I used to tell this story to scare my little brothers and their friends when they were younger, and it worked every time. I live in Louisiana, so there are plenty of local legends to go around. My favorite is the story of the Chattawa monster in my hometown. The tale goes that a circus train once derailed near Chattawa. On board were all kinds of exotic animals, but the most notorious was a freakish creature, a cross between a man and a beast, neither fully human nor fully animal. It was extremely ferocious, so it was kept in a heavily secured cage in its own rail car. When the train crashed, most of the animals were killed, except for a few monkeys that escaped into the woods, along with the creature. The legend says that if you drive out to the Chattawa Bridge at midnight, turn off your truck, and wait for the clock to strike 12, things get eerie. First, it goes completely silent. Then you start to hear chittering and the howls of monkeys, and the branches begin shaking as if moved by unseen hands. By the time you turn your truck back on, the Chattawa monster is said to be standing there, waiting for its next victim. I live in Lawrence, Kansas, home of the University of Kansas. On campus, there's a bell tower that students traditionally walk through on their way to graduation to receive their diplomas. According to legend, if you pass through the tower before graduating, you'll never graduate. There's another story tied to the bell tower. Anyone you kiss beneath the bells is said to become your future spouse. I live in a rural area where there's a very narrow gravel road in the middle of nowhere, lined with 2 or 3 abandoned houses. Everyone calls it Albino Road. The legend says a crazy albino lives in one of the creepier-looking houses. Teenagers drive by all the time, hoping to catch a glimpse of the reclusive figure. Nobody can say for certain that they've actually seen the albino, but everyone seems to know a guy who claims the albino came running at their car one night. One story that's part urban legend, but based on reality, involves a man known as Purple Aki from the Liverpool area. Look him up. He's real. He's actually assaulted people, mostly young men in gyms, groping or touching them. Over time, he became part of local folklore, imagined as a more monstrous, almost supernatural figure, as if the real person weren't terrifying enough. There's another local legend, too. In certain areas, if you walk around a particular church 3 times, the devil will start following you on the 3rd round. My granddad used to swear on everything that had happened to him once. I grew up in Yonkers, less than a mile from Untermeyer Park. At the edge of the park, along the aqueduct, there used to be an old pump house built into one of the steep hills. People in the area said it was connected to the cult rumored to be linked to the son of Sam Case. According to local stories, that was where they supposedly gathered and carried out strange rituals, even sacrificing animals like dogs and deer. The place was covered in disturbing graffiti and markings that many believed were demonic or satanic symbols.